Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Abdullah bin Zubair, a past researcher from Mayo Clinic Rochester in the Department of Neurosurgery. Today we have a recent graduate from Mayo Clinic Rochester from the Neurosurgical Department, Dr. Ryan Naylor. Hi Ryan,
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
all good, all good. So Ryan, first of all, just tell us about yourself a bit.
Yeah, so I did the MD PhD program at Mayo Clinic in Rochester. Started that in 2010, graduated in 2018, got my PhD in cell biology and molecular biology, um, and then joined the Mayo Neurosurgery program in 2018. Just recently graduated, as you said, and let's see, I did infolded training in endovascular neurosurgery as well as skull base oncology. So that was kind of my path through training. And recently, I'm on the job trail. And since we're recorded, I won't give too much information away since it's in progress. But yeah, that's about me.
So Ryan, we have a question for you first of all. How does
Yeah.
the interview process for the neurosurgical department works, matching into neurosurgery?
Yeah. So you submit your applications, and I'll tell you, at least at Mayo, we got somewhere around 300 applications a year, give or take. And of those 300, you review them all in detail. Each of them are reviewed by a faculty member as well as a resident member of the admissions group. And they are scored, and they're scored based on various parameters and metrics. And essentially, above a certain score makes you competitive for an interview. And again, I can only speak to my experience at Mayo, and I'm not even sure if at Mayo it changes year to year. But when I did it, when I was or one of the resident members of the admissions committee, I think we had I don't even remember how many interviews we were aiming to give out. Let's just say, for sake of argument, it was 30 or 45, whatever the number is. You try to, you kind of get these applications with a cumulative score above a certain number. Of course, it's more than 30 or 45, and then, they kind of get looked at a third time, or in some cases, a fourth time to try to figure out which folks you want to apply or you want to invite for an interview. And then, you offer the interview dates and go from there. Uh, what I will say at the very beginning of all this is uh, there are far more qualified people than any one program is able to offer interviews for. I think that's one of the hardest parts of the process. Um, is just that you could be very well qualified and some program might not invite you for an interview, and it has absolutely nothing to do with you. It's just of the 100 qualified or extremely qualified or overqualified applicants, however you want to say it. Just by sheer luck or bad luck, you weren't in the 30 or whatever that they invited.
So, regarding the day of the interview, what happens on the day of the interview?
Um, when you go on your interviews, you'll be given an itinerary to tell you, you go to dinner here, you show up here, you have an introduction by this person about this topic. Um, and then, again, every program kind of does it differently. Sometimes you do these two-on-one interviews, two faculty to one resident, or one resident applicant, I should say. Sometimes you do, one-on-one interviews. I'd say that in my experience, that was most common. They're usually 30-minute interviews. Sometimes they're 20, sometimes they're 15. Um, and you typically interview with um, maybe not necessarily every single member of the department, but certainly the vast majority. And they just ask you, yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's a very respectful process. They ask you questions about yourself, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to be a neurosurgeon? Why are you interested in our program? Um, and then you kind of go through the process. And again, I'll tell you, even if a program has 30 or 45 interview slots that they're willing to give out, these programs only have two, three, four, one sometimes, spots to actually match someone. And so you could have a fantastic application, you could have a fantastic interview, and you could be the number two person. And if they're only matching one person that year, you're not going to match there. So it's a tough process, but yeah, it's kind of how it goes.
So, according to you, what is the most important factor you look at during the applications when you're screening for the interview?
Every person who's reviewing applications will look at something a little bit different. Personally, I looked a lot into the personal statement, not so much for writing style or an interesting story, but I want to know, why do you want to be a neurosurgeon? That's a really important question for me. And then the second thing was the letters of recommendation. And as they've moved towards kind of a standardized letter of recommendation, they can sometimes be hard to interpret. Um, but in general, what you're looking for are letters from places with a good track record of training neurosurgeons or of training neurosurgery residents and telling you, hey, this person's in the top 10%. They were a go-getter. Everyone liked him or her. They were a team player. They were respectful. They were present and engaged, and those are the things that I look for. Of course, it's nice to have someone who knows how to tie or close skin or something like that as a sub I, but you'll learn that. You'll learn that over time, and for me, the things that I don't think that you can really change are your attitude. Um, and really just kind of your hunger, your drive to do it. And so those are the things that I'm really looking for. Some folks put a little bit more emphasis on your research. Some folks put a little more emphasis on clinical grades, and it sounds a little cliche, but you want to have a strong, well-rounded application. But I said it already, and I'll say it again. I think the vast majority of people are overqualified, or at least extremely qualified. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to take this group of applicants who are extraordinarily qualified for this job where you just don't have enough positions to offer everyone. And you're trying to find reasons to not invite them for an interview or to not rank them. And it's really hard. And so that's why I say, you want a good, well-rounded application. And I think the other thing that's really important is you want really positive interpersonal interactions as you go through your sub-I experience and your medical school experience. And so when like in a letter of recommendation, when they say, oh, this person was a fantastic team member, people liked having him or her around, that goes a long way. So those are the things that I look for.
So, regarding the scores, so does the score matter getting an interview, even though if you have scored 255, would you interview that person or would you interview someone who has a 279 or 278?
Most places will have a threshold. Below that threshold, they may not even review the rest of your application. I mean, we reviewed every single application that came across our desk. Um, but usually you have some kind of a threshold where you say, listen, if you're not above threshold X, we're they're just not going to be competitive. And it's not because anyone thinks you're a dummy. I mean, standardized tests are hard, and they're stressful. And in many cases, you've taken them like a decade ago or a really long time ago. And so they may not be accurate reflections of who you are today. But again, I go back to people are looking for reasons to not invite you for an interview. Um, you know, because there are so many super qualified people. And so, and they want to make sure that you're not going to be in danger of not passing the neurosurgery written boards and that sort of thing. Every program is going to set their own threshold. Um, in terms of a score, like I said, at Mayo, again, when I went through it, we didn't have a threshold that was like, oh, don't look at an application below this number. We looked at every single application. We looked at every single application twice. But I'll tell you, if you were just barely passing step one or step two, now that step two is, the one that matters or whatever, if you're just barely passing, you're just not going to be competitive.
So for my next question, so the program directors like Dr. Daniels, what do they look for in an applicant?
It's kind of like, what do they look for on your application? Everyone's going to be a little bit different. I should say, everyone that reviews your application is going to be looking for something different. And I would say, from the program standpoint, in my experience, that's one of the hardest things. Is if you take the folks on the admissions committee and you say, okay, listen, what is our admission statement? Who are we looking for? Are we looking for an excellent resident? Are we looking for someone who's going to be clinically strong, research strong? Are we looking for someone who we think they're going to be a superstar? And so in 10, 15 years from now, we want to say, hey, this person was in our family tree. You're going to get a bunch of different answers of what people are looking for. And so I would say that the program itself would have a hard time answering your question. What exactly are we looking for? But again, I think it is someone who again, I can only answer for myself. It's someone who has a compelling reason for why they want to be a neurosurgeon. And that doesn't mean like, oh, my loved one had this neurosurgical problem and I was so inspired by but you need to be able to articulate it. You need to say, neurosciences and neurology is just the most fascinating thing. And I'm in awe of neuroanatomy and I want to use my hands and I mean, whatever it is, you need to be able to articulate why you want to be a neurosurgeon, and it needs to be a compelling answer. You need to have a very solid and competitive academic background where you say, okay, I've done well on my step scores. I've gotten good clinical grades. I've gotten great letters of recommendations. I've done some research. Um, and then really like your kind of projected track through neurosurgery, MD PhDs or people who take time off to do research or something like that, they may be viewed by the program as being in kind of like a physician scientist track or a surgeon scientist track. So here's someone who may develop um, some academic interests and may go the academic route. Or maybe it's just someone who says, I hate research with a passion, but I really want to be an excellent surgeon. And they may be someone who's destined more for a community or a private practice job. And again, I'll tell you, at Mayo, we looked at both of those people the same, because the fact of the matter is that, I think sometimes in academics, you can have a little bit of like elitism where you say, oh, the only neurosurgeon that matters is an academic neurosurgeon. I think we had a really healthy view of the fact that, like, no, people who go out into the community and they provide neurosurgical services are like, that's a tremendous pathway. And they're often excellent surgeons, they're often excellent physicians. And we take a lot of pride in producing people and placing them into those positions as well. So, anyways, it's not a great answer to your question, because I think everyone has a little bit of a different perspective on what exactly they're looking for. Um, But in general, you want to be able to build an application package that is very well rounded.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And for the next question, does having a gap year between your graduation and applying for the match matter for the new surgical residency application?
No, I never paid attention to that.
Okay, so
I,
let's
I think I think the power of the gap year is it allows you protected time to be academically productive. So that's the biggest thing. If you're going to take a gap year, I would make sure that you use it to your advantage and really be academically productive during that time.
Okay, so moving on with that. So, recently a lot of people have been publishing a lot of meta-analysis. There are certain groups who actually do a lot of research, which is not quality research, as I'm quoting Dr. Burns right now, as compared to quantity. So, does basic science research papers matter more as compared to having meta-analyses who don't give you a significant amount of data in return?
Um, this is a hard question to answer. Again, I think what you're going to learn is that everyone views these things a little bit differently. Um, Meta-analyses are important. We learn a lot from them. We cite them. Um, we try to get a gauge of what reality is through meta-analyses. Um, you are right. It does seem that's been abused in the neurosurgical literature. You know, you don't really do any of your own data collection, and you're not really asking a novel question. You're not I mean, like, really, you're just synthesizing a bunch of data that's out there to verify a conclusion. Um, so I think they're important, but I think you're right that they've been abused. Um, what I'll say is that you should just not worry about that so much and follow your passion. So if you're passionate about basic science or translational science, do it. If you're passionate about clinical research, do it. Um, I think fundamentally people can see through the facade of, well, I'm doing basic science because I thought that it would look good for an application. Well, I'm doing, I've published 500 meta-analyses because I thought that it would look good for an application. If you're truly passionate about those 500 meta-analyses, great, do that. I mean, more power to you. I think it's more about the motivation, and you may be surprised that people can see through motivation quite a bit. And I think again, it really comes back to answering that question of like, why do you want to be a neurosurgeon? And if you can answer that question, and then you say, as evidenced by or in support of my answer, this has been my activity, this has been my track record to support that. I think that that's a very powerful and, like I said, kind of strong application package. It is disheartening as an applicant, whether you either have a basic or translational science interest and maybe you only have a couple of papers, but they're in, what I would say is, are probably higher impact journals or maybe have made an impact on the field of science outside of neurosurgery in particular. Sometimes it's a little bit unsettling, or you can feel insecure in that space because some of your co-applicants, like, well, I've published 100 papers already and they're all in JNS, they're all in the Red Journal or whatever. And I would say to that, just keep your head down, put the blinders on. You know, it's like if you're, I don't know, it's like if you're driving to a park or something. You and I might get there on different paths, but at the end of the day, we're both going to be at the park. And so try not to worry too much about what's going on around you. Follow your path, follow your passions, and I think that that will lead you to the right place.
It's just like you remember when we were on the truck driving back to Rochester, The paper I mentioned to you, the RTL and the Venus thing, the basic science
Yeah.
one, it's
Yeah.
still undergoing process since 2 years. Still, I have to, like, I wrote protocols, did the grants and stuff, but still, I need a PI for that. And
Yeah.
sometimes you don't find a PI for it, like for the idea. But at the end, it's more like that if you don't have anything to show up for it, like a paper, does it still matter the idea, something you're passionate about, and you can talk about it in the interviews or in your personal statement?
Uh, it does because not everyone is able to ask their own research questions. Not everyone has that level of curiosity or creativity or insight or whatever you want to call it. And so I think the fact that you're not just kind of following marching orders and you're actually thinking about your project on a deeper level and I think that that says a lot about who you are as an individual, as an applicant. You're right. It's hard to get credit for it outside of those intangible qualities. But nonetheless, like I remember I was a junior scientist or like a lab tech at UC San Francisco after I graduated from my undergrad and before I joined the MD PhD program at Mayo. And I was, that was my first research experience in the biological sciences, at least. And it took me a little while to kind of like get up and running on the project, and I was supporting a postdoc and that sort of thing. And as I started to really get interested in the project, I would have these ideas, for experiments or these ideas for future projects or we're studying this, but this is what we really need to be studying. And I'll tell you to this, so that was I should admit this, but that was like not quite 20 years ago, but it was a long time. I mean, it was 15 years ago, right? Almost 16 years ago. And I'll tell you, I never saw those experiments like the project that I had created that I had obsessed about in my head. I never saw it through to completion because exactly of what you said, I couldn't get someone else excited about it. Um, y- you know, and then like I go on to medical school or graduate school, whatever. I kind of get lost in my educational thing and, fast forward 10 years about, and some group had did the same thing and published it in Cancer Cell. And I remember feeling a little crummy about it. I was like, oh man, I should have done that. That could have been me. And then I thought, I don't know. I think it's good that apparently I was 10 years ahead of the game. And of course, not 10 years ahead of the game, right? Because it probably took those people 5 years to do the experiments and get the paper published. So, maybe at best I was a contemporary, but it gave me a lot of confidence in just my ability to like, hey, this was a good idea. And it was a relevant question. And the way that we would have answered it is the same. And so I don't know, you're always going to be who you are. And no matter what position you go to, you're going to bring your aptitudes, including your curiosity, including your passions and motivations. And so you're right. You may not ever get credit for the question that's just burning a hole in your mind right now. But rest assured, that's not a one and done thing. That's an aptitude about yourself. That's not like, oh, this is your only opportunity to come up with something interesting or strike it big.
So, coming to my last question, Ryan, have you interviewed recently any Pakistani, Indian, or Bengali national IMGs in the recent past few years? And what are your reviews about them?
We have interviewed several IMGs. Um, I don't specifically remember. I guess I would say almost certainly I have. they don't necessarily, I mean, no one stands out in particular because of their nationality. So I can talk about my experience with IMGs a little bit more broadly. Um, I'll tell you, like, as I reviewed applications, during my time on the resident admissions committee or whatever, I was always drawn to IMG applications. The things that IMGs go through to, often coming out of some kind of adversity or persecution in their home country, the tenacity and work ethic that they display throughout their undergraduate education, their medical school education, whatever it is. I mean, is like to say it's inspiring and impressive seems to not be worthy of what it truly is. I mean, it's truly incredible. Um, what I'll say is that is that the thing that you're fighting against as an IMG is that the US government funds, in some part, medical training of residents and fellows in the United States. And so most places try to offer those positions to US citizens. We can debate whether that's right or wrong, um, but it's reality, unfortunately. And but my experience with IMGs has been almost exclusively positive. I think as a group, they're incredibly well qualified. They have personal characteristics and attributes that I would love to have as in a co-resident and a colleague someday. And there's actually been a decent amount of data that's come out in the last couple of years that show that, our IMGs are the ones that are going into academic positions and that are really truly being academically productive. And so when I talk about the motor, the desire, all those sorts of things, I think IMGs have it in spades. But unfortunately, you're fighting a system that isn't in your favor. And again, whether that's good or bad, is beyond this topic. But yeah, that's been my experience with IMGs. You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
And thank you so much for the advice right now. And I hope you find a job soon. You're done with your
yeah,
fellowship as well. So you're
yeah,
independent now. So thank you so much for today.
yeah. You bet. Good to see you.